A janitor is shoved in front of shoppers until he drops one sentence that flips the whole mall. He's not the help, he's the new owner. But this isn't a fairy tale. Behind those shiny floors are crushing debts, angry liens, and a rich developer who wants it all torn down. The single dad has one thing money can't buy, a town that remembers what this place used to mean. Free haircuts, warm meals, second chances. Then another hit. His own child collapses from the fight. The clock is ticking. Courtroom lights, frozen bank accounts, a past mistake that could betray everything. If mercy is bad business, why is the whole community showing up anyway? When power says demolish and a father says restore, who wins and what will it cost? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as David Harper wrung out his mop one last time. The food court tiles gleamed, reflecting the empty tables and chairs stacked neatly against closed restaurant gates. His knees ached from the night's work, but satisfaction warmed his chest. Every surface sparkled. He glanced at the large clock above the shuttered pizza counter, 7:15. Grace would be waiting by the employee entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, probably scrolling through her phone. His daughter never complained about these early mornings, though dark circles beneath her eyes told their own story. David wheeled his cleaning cart toward the supply closet, nodding at Elena, the elderly woman who ran the flower kiosk. She waved back, already arranging fresh carnations in small buckets. "Morning, Mr. Harper," she called softly. "Morning, Elena. Those yellow ones are beautiful today." Her weathered face crinkled into a smile. "For you, half price. Maybe tomorrow." He patted his empty pocket and kept moving. The mall felt different in these quiet hours. Peaceful. The polished floors stretched out like a frozen lake, undisturbed by the usual chaos of shoppers. A few early walkers power-walked past in their sneakers, arms pumping. Two mall security guards lounged near the information desk, sipping coffee from paper cups. The sharp click of heels echoed through the atrium. David's shoulders tensed. Margaret Colton had arrived. She swept through the main entrance like a cold wind, her navy suit pressed to perfection, pearl necklace catching the light. Her silver hair sat in a flawless bun, not a strand out of place. Behind her trailed James, her assistant, fumbling with a tablet and trying to match her brisk pace. Margaret's eyes scanned the mall with the intensity of a general inspecting troops. She paused at a bench, running one manicured finger along its surface. Her nose wrinkled. "James, make a note. These benches need replacing. They look shabby." "Yes, Mrs. Colton." David pushed his cart faster, hoping to reach the service corridor before... "You there!" He stopped, turned slowly. Margaret stood 20 feet away, arms crossed, studying him like something unpleasant she'd discovered on her shoe. "Aren't you supposed to be finished by 7? It's past 7:15. Just putting away the equipment, ma'am." Her lip curled. "Ma'am? How quaint." She stepped closer, heels clicking against the floor he'd just cleaned. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" David remained silent. "Trash. Human trash cluttering up my property." Her voice carried across the open space. Elena ducked behind her flowers. The security guards straightened, suddenly alert. "You shuffle around here at night, leaving water spots, taking twice as long as necessary. And now you're still here when decent people arrive." Heat crawled up David's neck, but he kept his voice level. "I'll be gone in 2 minutes." 2 minutes too many." She turned to the guards. "Marcus, Trevor, remove this man from my mall. Now." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "Mrs. Colton?" Marcus started. "He works here." "Not anymore." Her voice sliced through his protest. "I want him out, immediately." More people had gathered. A young mother with a stroller, 3 teenagers with backpacks, an elderly couple in matching tracksuits. They watched with the horrified fascination of witnesses to a car crash. David straightened his spine, standing to his full height. His hands, calloused from years of honest work, hung steady at his sides. "I have every right to be here." Margaret's face flushed crimson. "How dare you talk back to me?" She jabbed a finger at the guards. "I said remove him." "Are you deaf?" Marcus and Trevor approached reluctantly. Marcus, the larger of the two, reached for David's arm. "Sorry, man. Just come with us, okay? Don't make this harder." David didn't move. His hand went to his jacket pocket, pulling out a sealed white envelope. The courthouse stamp was visible through the paper. "Before you touch me," he said quietly, "you might want to look at this." Trevor frowned. "What is it?" David broke the seal with one finger, unfolding the documents inside. The official letterhead of the county courthouse caught the light. Proof of ownership. He held it up so Margaret could see. From last week's foreclosure auction. The color drained from Margaret's face like water from a bathtub. That's impossible. The mortgage company foreclosed on Crestwood Mall 6 weeks ago." David's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "It went to auction last Tuesday. One bidder." He folded the papers carefully. "Me!" Marcus released David's arm as if it had burned him. Trevor took a step back. The crowd pressed closer. Someone whispered, "Did he just say he bought the mall?" Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her perfect composure cracked, revealing something raw and frightened underneath. "You're lying." David shook his head. "The courthouse doesn't lie, Mrs. Colton. You haven't owned this place for over a month. The bank just hadn't told you yet." Her hands trembled. The tablet slipped from James's fingers, clattering on the floor. "You don't own this place anymore," David said, his voice carrying across the silent atrium. "I do." Margaret stared at him, face pale as winter snow, her body swaying slightly as if the ground beneath her had suddenly shifted. David's hands shook as he pushed through the glass doors into the morning air. The November chill bit through his worn jacket, but he welcomed it. Behind him, the crowd's murmurs faded into silence. The old Ford pickup sat alone in the far corner of the lot, rust eating at its wheel wells. Grace leaned against the passenger door, her chemistry textbook balanced on the hood. She looked up as his footsteps crunched across the asphalt. "Dad?" Her brown eyes, her mother's eyes, searched his face. "I saw people gathering," and Mrs. Colton looked like she'd seen a ghost. He fumbled with his keys. "Get in, sweetheart. We need to talk." She slid her textbook into her backpack and climbed into the cab. The engine coughed twice before catching. "Dad, your hands are shaking." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She twisted in her seat to face him. What happened in there? David pulled onto the main road, focusing on the traffic. A school bus rumbled past, normal people heading to normal jobs. "I bought the mall." The words hung between them like a confession. Grace's mouth fell open. "You... what?" "Last week, at the courthouse auction. But how? We barely..." She stopped herself. "I mean, that must cost... everything." He turned into Marty's Diner, the same place they'd eaten breakfast every Saturday since Anna died. "Your college fund is safe. I promised your mother, but everything else, it's tied up in that building now." Inside the diner, Marty himself brought coffee without being asked. Black for David, cream, and 2 sugars for Grace. The red vinyl booth creaked as they settled in. "Start from the beginning," Grace said. David wrapped his fingers around the warm mug. 6 weeks ago, I heard Marcus talking. The mortgage company foreclosed on the mall. Mrs. Colton had been missing payments, trying to keep up appearances while everything crumbled. "So you decided to buy it?" "Not at first." He stared into his coffee. "But I kept thinking about all those empty stores." Mr. Chen's restaurant boarded up, the Henderson's craft shop gone. Good people pushed out because rent kept climbing while customers disappeared. Grace reached across the table, covering his calloused hand with her smaller one. "I've been saving since your mother got sick. Every extra shift, every holiday bonus, plus my disability check from the VA." His voice dropped. "And your grandparents left us that money." "Mom's parents, but that was for emergencies." This is an emergency, just not the kind they imagined. He met her eyes. That mall used to be the heart of this town. Now it's dying and taking the community with it. Marty brought their usual scrambled eggs and wheat toast for David, pancakes for Grace, without taking an order. "You could have told me," Grace said softly. "I didn't want you to worry if it fell through." She poked at her pancakes. "So you own it now?" "The whole mall? Every leaking pipe and cracked tile. That's—" She shook her head, a smile breaking through. "That's incredible. You stood up to her, to Margaret Colton. Dad, you were so brave." "Brave?" He snorted. "I was terrified. But you did it anyway. That's what brave means." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Around them, the diner hummed with morning conversation. Construction workers grabbed coffee to go. A table of retired teachers shared gossip over toast. "What happens now?" Grace asked. "Now I figure out how to run a mall." He pushed eggs around his plate. "Your mother would have known what to do. She had vision, plans. You have vision too." "Do I?" Grace leaned forward. "You see people, Dad. Really see them. Not like Mrs. Colton, who only sees dollar signs or problems. You see who they could be." "That's not enough to—" "Yes, it is." Her voice carried her mother's stubbornness. "You've already given me everything that matters. Love, faith, the knowledge that work has dignity no matter what it is. I want to leave you more than that. Then leave me a community that works, one where Mr. Chen can reopen his restaurant and the Hendersons can sell their crafts." She squeezed his hand. "That's a legacy worth having." David paid the check and drove back to the mall. Grace had geometry class, but he promised to pick her up after school to show her everything. The administrative offices occupied the second floor, overlooking the main atrium. David climbed the stairs, documents tucked under his arm. Through the glass door he could see Margaret at her desk, papers spread before her, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up when he knocked, ended her call without saying goodbye. "Come to gloat?" Her voice had lost its edge, sounding hollow. "No." He entered, closing the door behind him. "Come to offer you a job." Her laugh was bitter. "You're joking." "General manager. Same salary you're making now." Margaret's fingers tightened on her pen. "Why would you do that?" "Because you know this place. Every vendor contract, every maintenance schedule, you've run it for 8 years. I've run it into the ground, apparently." David pulled out the chair across from her desk, sat down like an equal, not a subordinate. The economy ran it into the ground. Competition from online shopping ran it into the ground. He placed the ownership documents on her desk. "But you kept it alive longer than most would have." "I called you trash." Her voice cracked slightly. "In front of everyone." "Yes." "And you want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me. Help me turn this place around." Margaret studied him, searching for the trick, the trap. Finding none seemed to disturb her more than finding one would have. "You'll fail," she said finally. "You know nothing about running a business this size." "Maybe. I'll document every mistake. When you crash, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." "If that's what you need to believe," David stood, "but I think you're tired of watching things fail. I think you want to build something that matters." He headed for the door. "Fine," Margaret called after him. "I'll take the job, but don't expect me to pretend this will work." David paused at the threshold. "I don't expect you to pretend anything, Mrs. Colton. Just show up tomorrow ready to work." He left her sitting there, staring at the papers that proved the janitor she'd called trash now held her future in his calloused hands. The next afternoon, David picked Grace up from school in their aging pickup. She bounced into the passenger seat, backpack hitting the floor. "Ready for the grand tour?" she asked. "More like damage assessment." They parked near the service entrance. David grabbed a flashlight and clipboard from the glove compartment. Inside, the mall's problems revealed themselves like wounds under harsh light. The north wing came first. Water stains spread across ceiling tiles like brown clouds. David pressed one tile with a broom handle. It crumbled, showering them with damp chunks. "That's not good," Grace said. "Roof's been leaking for years." They moved past Henderson's Crafts, its windows papered over with yellowed newsprint. Chen's kitchen stood dark, a handwritten "closed indefinitely" sign taped crooked on the door. 8 stores in a row sat empty, their gates pulled down and locked. The escalator to the second floor stood frozen, its steps covered in caution tape. "How long has it been broken?" Grace asked. 3 months, according to the maintenance logs." She pulled out her phone, taking pictures. "We could start a volunteer group. Get people from church to help paint, fix what we can. Paint won't fix structural damage, but it's a start." David checked another ceiling panel. More water damage. The heating unit in the corner rattled like bones in a box. "We need money first," he said. "Can't ask volunteers to work in unsafe conditions." They continued their inspection. The food court's tiles were cracked. Half the lights in the main atrium flickered or stayed dark. The fountain hadn't run in 2 years, its basin filled with loose change and garbage. Grace bent to pick up a crushed soda can. "Mom would have hated seeing it like this. She loved this place when we first moved here. Remember? She'd bring you to the playground while I worked." "The carousel," Grace said, "with the painted horses." They found it in the east wing, covered by a tarp. David pulled back a corner. The horses were still there, their painted eyes dull, brass poles tarnished. "Maybe we could fix—" One thing at a time. They finished their walk as the sun set, casting long shadows through the skylights. David's clipboard filled with notes: broken door mechanisms, damaged flooring, electrical issues, plumbing problems. Margaret waited in the main office, sitting behind her desk like a queen on a throne. Her smile held no warmth. "Enjoying your new kingdom? It needs work." "Work?" She laughed, pushing 2 thick folders across the desk. "Try reading these first." David picked up the folders, financial records by the look of them, tax documents, legal papers. "Thought you should see what you really bought," Margaret said. "Sweet dreams, Mr. Harper." At home, David spread the papers across the kitchen table. Grace heated leftover spaghetti while he sorted through years of records. The numbers blurred together at first, then they sharpened into focus, each one worse than the last. Unpaid electric bills, $42,000. Property taxes, 3 years. Delinquent, $180,000. A lawsuit from a customer who slipped on the unmaintained floor, pending settlement of $75,000. Outstanding vendor contracts with penalty clauses. Emergency repair estimates that had never been addressed. The total debt climbed past $500,000. David's coffee grew cold. The spaghetti sat untouched. He calculated and recalculated, hoping for different answers. The numbers stayed the same. Grace found him at midnight, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. "Dad?" He looked up. His eyes were red, though no tears had fallen. "How bad is it?" He gestured at the papers. She picked up a few, scanning the figures. Her face went pale. "This can't be right." "It's right." "But the auction price—" "Didn't include the debts. They transfer with ownership." His voice cracked. "I didn't know to check. Didn't know what questions to ask." Grace sank into the chair beside him. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the financial disaster spread before them. "Can we return it? Give it back?" "No returns on county auctions." "What about a loan?" "What bank would loan money for this?" He picked up the tax notice. "They could foreclose next month if we don't start paying." "There has to be something." I gambled everything on this." David's fist hit the table, making the papers jump. "Our savings." "Your college fund. The equity from this house." "Dad, I might have just bought us a mountain too high to climb." Grace sat quiet for a moment. Then she reached over, placing her hand on his. Her fingers were smaller than his, but steady. "Then we climb it together." "Grace, you don't understand." I understand that you taught me to never give up, that faith means moving forward, even when you can't see the path. This is different." "No, it's not." Her grip tightened. "We've climbed mountains before. When Mom died. When you came back from Afghanistan, different. We climbed those." David stared at the stack of bills, each one a stone in an avalanche waiting to bury them, but Grace's hand stayed warm on his, an anchor in the storm. The weight of reality pressed down, heavier than any load he'd carried as a janitor, but not heavier than the weight he'd carried as a soldier or as a widower. Not impossible, just hard. Saturday morning brought rain, drumming against the skylights as David and Grace walked through the mall's west wing. Margaret followed 10 feet behind, her heels clicking sharply on the worn terrazzo floor. "This is where the toy store was," Grace said, pointing at a darkened storefront. Paper still clung to the windows, advertising a closing sale from 6 months ago. David made another note on his clipboard. Behind them, Margaret made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a snort. Writing won't bring them back. They continued past empty spaces that once held life. A jewelry repair shop, a shoe store, a place that sold handmade soaps. Each window reflected their small group back at them, 3 figures in a cavern of lost commerce. Near the fountain they found movement. An elderly woman struggled with a handcart loaded with boxes, trying to navigate around a broken tile. David recognized her immediately, Mrs. Alvarez from the bookstore. "Let me help with that." He took the cart's handle before she could protest. Grace grabbed a sliding box. "You're leaving?" Grace asked. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, her weathered hands trembling. "Rent was due yesterday. Can't pay what I don't have." "How much?" $3,000. Might as well be $3 million. She looked at her boxes of books. 40 years in this spot. Met my husband here when it was just built. Now?" David set down the cart. "What if you didn't have to leave?" Margaret stepped forward. "Mr. Harper, perhaps we should discuss, what would it take for you to stay?" David asked Mrs. Alvarez. The old woman's eyes glistened. "A miracle. How about half rent for 6 months? Pay what you can, when you can." Mrs. Alvarez stared at him. Margaret grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? We need every dollar." "We need stores open." David turned back to Mrs. Alvarez. "Will that work?" The elderly woman's legs wobbled. Grace caught her elbow, guiding her to a bench. Tears ran down the creases in her face. "You mean it?" "I mean it." Mrs. Alvarez covered her face with both hands and sobbed. Not the polite tears of gratitude, but deep, shaking sobs of relief. "Financial suicide," Margaret muttered. Word traveled fast in empty spaces. Within an hour, other shopkeepers appeared from their half-packed stores. The Korean family who ran the alteration shop, the veteran with the watch repair kiosk, the young couple trying to make their candy store work. David made the same offer to each one. Reduced rent, flexible terms, time to rebuild. The alteration shop owner, Mr. Kim, shook David's hand with both of his. "You don't know what this means. My wife, she cried all night thinking we'd lose everything." "We help each other," David said. "That's how we all survive." Margaret paced behind him, her face flushed. "You're giving away our revenue stream." "I'm keeping the lights on. Empty stores pay nothing. They'll take advantage—" "Of what?" "My trust." David faced her. "Maybe that's what's been missing here." By noon, 7 small businesses had agreed to stay. The mall still echoed with empty spaces, but now there were pockets of hope, lights coming back on, boxes being unpacked instead of packed. Grace had an idea over lunch, leftover sandwiches eaten standing in the food court. "We should tell everyone, the whole community." "Tell them what?" "That the mall's under new management, that you're trying to save it." She pulled out her phone. "We could hold a meeting, right here in the food court." Who would come? Everyone who remembers when this place mattered. Everyone who needs it to matter again. David looked around the tired space, broken tiles, flickering lights, abandoned storefronts, but also Mrs. Alvarez, visible through her store window, shelving books with renewed energy, Mr. Kim teaching his grandson to thread a needle, the candy store couple holding hands as they cleaned their display cases. "Tuesday night?" Grace suggested. "Give people time to hear about it?" David closed his eyes. The weight of the debts pressed on his shoulders. The lawsuit, the tax bills, mountains of problems with no clear solutions. "Lord," he whispered, "I need strength. If this is the path, help me walk it. If it's not, show me another way." "Amen," Grace said softly. They opened their eyes to find Margaret staring at them. Her expression was strange, part confusion, part something else. Discomfort, maybe, or recognition of something long forgotten. "You pray," she said, not a question. "Every day. For the mall, for wisdom, for the people who depend on it." Margaret turned away, but not before David caught something in her eyes. A crack in her armor, perhaps, or just a trick of the fluorescent lights. Grace designed a simple flyer on her phone. "Community meeting, the future of Crestwood Mall. Tuesday, 7 p.m., food court. Everyone welcome." By evening, they'd posted copies everywhere. Store windows, light poles in the parking lot, the community bulletin board at the grocery store down the street. Margaret watched from the mall office as David and Grace worked. When they finally left for the night, she picked up her phone. She scrolled through old contacts until she found the name, Richard Brennan, developer. The man who'd tried to buy the mall before the auction. "Richard?" "It's Margaret." "About Crestwood." "Yes, the new owner. He's an idealist, cutting rents, making promises." She paused, watching David's truck pull away through the window. "I thought you should know, before he ruins everything." Sunday afternoon brought unexpected warmth to November. By 6:30, cars filled the parking lot in numbers David hadn't imagined. Old couples who'd met at the mall's fountain 40 years ago. Veterans from the VFW hall, young families pushing strollers, they all came. Grace tested the microphone while David watched the food court fill. Not just the plastic chairs they'd arranged, but people standing along the walls, sitting on the edge of planters, crowding near the old subway that had closed 2 years back. "This is more than we expected," Grace whispered. Mrs. Alvarez waved from her spot near the front. Mr. Kim had brought his entire extended family. The candy store couple held hands in the third row. Even some teenagers lounged against the back wall, curious about the fuss. Margaret stood apart, arms crossed, studying the crowd with an expression David couldn't read. "Ready?" Grace asked. David nodded, though his stomach churned. Public speaking had never been his strength. He preferred working quietly, fixing problems with his hands rather than words. The microphone squealed. The crowd quieted. "Thank you for coming." His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. "I'm David Harper. Some of you might know me as the janitor who used to clean these floors." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. "Last week I bought this mall at auction, not because I'm rich. I'm not. Not because I'm a businessman. I'm definitely not that either." He found Grace's eyes in the crowd. She nodded encouragement. "I bought it because I believe this place matters. To all of us." An older man called out, "Used to bring my kids here every weekend." "Me too," David said. "My wife and I brought our daughter here when she was small. She learned to walk right over there, by the fountain that doesn't work anymore." The crowd murmured with recognition. Everyone had memories here. "I know the mall looks tired. I know stores have closed. But I also know we can bring it back, not as some fancy shopping center for people who don't live here, but as our place, a hub for families, for veterans, for small business owners who deserve a chance." Applause started in the back and spread forward. "I've already started working with some of our longtime vendors." He gestured to Mrs. Alvarez and Mr. Kim. "Reduced rents. Flexible terms, because an empty mall serves no one, but a mall full of local businesses serves everyone." The applause grew louder. Someone whistled. "We're going to fix the fountain, open the old cinema for community events, Maybe even get the skating rink running again for the kids. A teenager in the back perked up. For real? For real. But I need your help. This isn't my mall. It's ours. We rebuild it together or not at all. The crowd erupted. People stood clapping. Grace beamed. Even Margaret's stern expression softened slightly, impressed despite herself by the response. The energy in the room felt electric. Hope, long dormant, sparked to life. Then the main doors opened. A man entered like he owned the air itself. Charcoal suit, Italian shoes, silver hair slicked back. He walked through the crowd, which parted instinctively, his footsteps echoing on the tile. "Quite the speech," he said, his voice carrying without the microphone. "Very moving." David recognized the type immediately. Money and arrogance wrapped in expensive fabric. Richard Lawson. The man didn't extend his hand. "Lawson Development Group. I believe you've been reviewing the mall's financial records?" "I have?" "Then you've seen my name on several documents." The crowd had gone silent. Margaret's face drained of color. She stepped backward, trying to disappear behind a pillar. "I hold liens against this property," Richard continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Substantial liens, more than enough to challenge your ownership in court." Worried murmurs rippled through the crowd. "You bought a building, Mr. Harper. But you didn't buy freedom from its obligations. My lawyers will be filing suit tomorrow morning." Mrs. Alvarez gasped. Mr. Kim's family huddled closer together. Richard smiled, cold as winter concrete. "I had plans for this property before you interfered. Luxury condominiums, real development, not this." He waved dismissively at the crowd. "Nostalgia project." David stepped down from the small platform. He walked straight to Richard and extended his hand. Richard looked at it like David had offered him garbage. David kept his hand out, waiting. Finally, Richard shook it, his grip meant to intimidate. David's was stronger. Years of mopping, fixing, carrying. They'd built strength Richard's gym membership couldn't match. "File your lawsuit," David said, his voice carrying now too. "We'll see you in court?" "You can't win. I have resources you can't imagine." "Maybe. But I have something you don't?" "What's that?" David gestured to the crowd. "Them." Richard's smile faltered slightly. He looked around at the faces, determined now, not just worried, angry at this outsider threatening their hope. "We'll see," Richard said. He turned and walked out, his footsteps the only sound until the doors closed behind him. The food court stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Grace's voice rang out. "We're with you, Dad." The dam broke. People surged forward, surrounding David with promises of support, offers of help, declarations that they'd fight too. But later, in their small kitchen, the bravado faded. David and Grace sat at the table, bills spread before them, Richard's business card like a snake among the papers. "He has millions," David said quietly. "Lawyers? Connections. You have us." "Is that enough?" Grace squeezed his hand. "It has to be." David stared at the mounting evidence of the battle ahead, his savings gone, his credit stretched, now a lawsuit that could destroy everything before they'd barely started. "The fight has only begun," he whispered. Monday morning came too soon. David's alarm buzzed at 4:30, but he'd been awake for an hour already, staring at the ceiling and calculating impossible numbers. The lawsuit would be filed today. Richard Lawson's lawyers would descend like vultures on wounded prey. He moved through his morning routine quietly. Shower, shave, the same flannel shirt he'd worn to church yesterday. In the kitchen, Grace already sat at the table, her math textbook open but unread. "Couldn't sleep either?" She shook her head, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. "Keep thinking about that man, the way he looked at everyone, like we were beneath him, like we were nothing." David poured coffee, black and bitter. "We're not nothing." "I know," she managed a small smile. "But knowing it and proving it are different things." They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of being each other's only family. Outside, the sun crept over the horizon, painting their modest neighborhood in gold that made even the cracked sidewalks look hopeful. At the mall, David arrived to find Mrs. Alvarez already there, her gray hair tied back with a bandana, carrying a bucket and mop. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like?" She dunked the mop. "This place needs cleaning, and I've got time. I can't pay you." "Did I ask for money?" She fixed him with a look that reminded him of his late mother. "My husband proposed to me in this mall 43 years ago, right by that broken fountain. I'm not letting some developer tear down my memories. Within an hour, others arrived. Mr. Chen from the closed electronics store brought his teenage sons and toolboxes. The Ramirez family showed up with paintbrushes. Even Tom Bradley, the Vietnam vet who ran the candy shop before it shuttered, wheeled in with his oxygen tank and a determined expression. "Heard you need help," Tom wheezed. "Can't do much, but I can supervise." David's throat tightened. "You don't have to—" "Son, I spent 2 tours fighting for this country. I can spend a morning fighting for this mall." They worked through the morning. Someone brought a radio, filling the empty corridors with classic rock. Grace arrived after school with 3 classmates, armed with cleaning supplies they'd borrowed from the janitor's closet. Around noon, Marcus Johnson approached David, young, maybe 25, with precise faded hair and calloused hands. "Mr. Harper? I used to run a barber shop here. Still got all my equipment in storage." He shifted nervously. "Can't pay much rent right now, but I can cut hair." "Maybe we work something out?" "What kind of arrangement?" "Free cuts for volunteers? And once I'm earning, I pay you back rent?" David didn't hesitate. "Deal." Marcus's face broke into the first genuine smile David had seen from him. "For real?" "For real." "When can you start?" "Tomorrow, if that's okay." Word spread. By mid-afternoon, David had fielded requests from a nail salon owner, a shoe repairman, and 2 food vendors. Each conversation the same. Little money now, but fierce determination to try. Margaret observed from her office doorway, arms crossed. When David passed, she called out, "You're going to bankrupt yourself before Lawson even gets to court." "Maybe. These people can't pay. You know that. They're paying in other ways." He gestured to the volunteers scrubbing floors, patching walls, replacing light bulbs. "Look at them." She did look, really looked. Mrs. Alvarez teaching Grace's friends to properly clean windows. Marcus already measuring his old shop space, planning his comeback. The Ramirez children carefully painting over graffiti. "They respect you," she said quietly, almost to herself. "They respect hope." Margaret turned away, but not before David caught something in her expression. Not quite warmth, but less ice than before. That evening, David's kitchen table became command central. Grace typed on her school laptop while David sketched layouts on notebook paper. "We need flyers," Grace said. "Something simple. Crestwood Mall, reopening with heart, or something better than that." "That's good. Keep it simple." She created a basic design. Nothing fancy, just clear text and the mall's address. "I can print these at school. Miss Patterson won't mind if I explain." They worked through dinner, microwaved leftovers eaten between spreadsheet adjustments. Grace built a simple budget, her fingers flying over calculator keys. "If we get 10 vendors at reduced rent, and they each pay just half for 3 months, we can cover utilities and basic repairs." That's cutting it close. "Everything's close, Dad." By 9 o'clock, exhaustion hit them both. David's eyes burned from staring at numbers. Grace yawned every few seconds. "Bed," he ordered. "Few more minutes." "Bed. School tomorrow." She saved her work, then hugged him good night. "We're going to make this work?" "Yeah." "You don't sound convinced." He pulled her closer. "I'm convinced we're going to try." Sometimes that's enough. After she went to bed, David stayed up another hour, refining plans, adjusting numbers. Finally, he too surrendered to exhaustion, falling asleep at the table, his head pillowed on hope disguised as paperwork. The morning would bring lawyers and threats. But tonight, in this small kitchen, with his daughter safe and community members ready to fight alongside him, David Harper allowed himself to believe. The morning sun streamed through the mall's skylights, illuminating dust motes that danced above 30 volunteers armed with mops, brushes, and determination. The smell of Murphy's oil soap mixed with fresh paint, creating an oddly hopeful perfume that replaced years of neglect. David hauled garbage bags to the dumpster, his shirt already soaked through despite the early hour. Each trip back inside revealed more progress, floors emerging from beneath grime, windows clearing to let in forgotten light. In the food court, Grace stood on a ladder with 3 other teenagers, sketching the outline of a mural on the far wall. She'd stayed up past midnight designing it, a tree with roots that spelled community and branches reaching toward painted sky. "Higher on the left branch, Malik," she directed a gangly boy holding a pencil. "We want it to frame the whole seating area." Mrs. Alvarez worked nearby, scrubbing tables that hadn't seen proper cleaning in months. "Beautiful design, Mija. Your mother would be proud." Grace's hand stilled for a moment, then continued sketching. "Thanks." Margaret arrived at 10, wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than David's monthly grocery budget. She surveyed the chaos with obvious displeasure. "This is completely unorganized. You have people doing redundant work." She pointed to 2 men both cleaning the same stretch of hallway. "Inefficient." Tom Bradley looked up from his supervision post. "Then organize us, lady." "You're the manager, aren't you?" Margaret's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone, apparently ready to make calls from a safe distance, but then she noticed David emerging from a storage closet, carrying ancient cleaning supplies, spider webs in his hair, working harder than men half his age. Something shifted in her expression. "Fine." She set down her purse. "You two stop overlapping. Johnson, take the north corridor. Williams, continue south. Mrs. Chen, those windows need newspaper, not paper towels. You're leaving streaks." Within an hour, Margaret had transformed chaos into system. She divided volunteers into teams, assigned sections, even created a supply station where people could refill buckets without wandering the mall searching for water. When a paint can tipped over near the fountain, she grabbed paper towels before anyone asked. Her designer jeans acquired their first splatter, then another. By noon, she'd rolled up her silk sleeves and was showing Marcus the proper way to strip old adhesive from his barbershop windows. "Acetone first, then scraper at a 45-degree angle," she demonstrated. "Otherwise, you'll scratch the glass." Marcus watched her work, surprised. "You know maintenance?" "I know business. Sometimes they're the same thing." David passed by, carrying lumber for storefront repairs. Their eyes met. He nodded, simple acknowledgement, nothing more. But Margaret felt it like approval she hadn't known she wanted. The food court mural grew throughout the day. Grace had recruited every teenager in sight, giving each a section to paint. The tree trunk emerged in rich browns, roots spreading across the floor-level wall in deep burgundy. One girl added small details, a bird here, leaves there. Malik painted names of local businesses into the bark, memorializing shops that once thrived. "It's our history," Grace explained to anyone who asked. "Even if they're gone, they mattered." By 5 o'clock, exhaustion weighed on everyone, but nobody wanted to leave. Someone ordered pizzas, 20 boxes that appeared without explanation, though David suspected Mrs. Alvarez had made calls to her church group. They gathered in the half-painted food court, sitting on freshly cleaned floors, boxes open between them like communion. The setting sun painted everything golden through the clean windows. "Tomorrow, we tackle the fountain," Tom Bradley announced. "Got a buddy who knows pumps." "I can rewire the lights around it," offered Chen's oldest son. "Been studying electrical work at Votech." Plans tumbled out between bites. Who knew someone with tile experience who could get paint at wholesale prices? Which stores might reopen first? Grace moved through the crowd with her phone, snapping photos. She caught Mrs. Alvarez laughing at something Tom said, Marcus demonstrating a haircut technique with his hands. Margaret, surprisingly, sitting cross-legged on the floor, pizza slice in hand, actually listening to a vendor's story about the mall's better days. "Posting these now," Grace announced, uploading to Instagram, Facebook, the local community board. She crafted captions with care. "Crestwood Mall lives again. Community volunteers bringing hope back to our neighborhood. Join us tomorrow." Within minutes, likes and comments poured in. People asking how to help. Old customers wondering if their favorite stores would return. A local news blogger requesting an interview. "Dad, look." She showed David her phone. "The Gazette wants to do a story." "Tell them to come tomorrow. Let them see the work, not just hear about it." Margaret observed this exchange from across the circle. She'd watched David all day, how he knew every volunteer's name, asked about their families, thanked them individually. He never ordered, only asked, never took credit, always redirected praise to others. It bothered her, this leadership through service. It challenged everything she'd built her career on, authority through position, respect through fear, success through hardness. Yet here sat 30 people, exhausted and filthy, planning to return tomorrow for no pay, no glory, just the promise that David Harper believed in something worth saving. The pizza finished, volunteers began departing with promises to return. David and Grace helped collect trash, stack boxes, ensure nothing was left behind. Margaret remained seated, studying David as he worked. When he finally noticed her watching, she stood quickly, brushing dust from her ruined jeans. "Tomorrow, I'll bring proper scheduling charts," she said stiffly. "This chaos needs structure." "Appreciate that." She gathered her purse, then paused. "Your daughter's mural. It's not terrible." Coming from Margaret, it sounded like the highest praise. After she left, Grace showed David her phone again. 300 shares already. People are commenting about memories from the mall. Look, someone posted their prom photos from the fountain. David read the comments, each one a small vote of faith. His vision, their vision, was spreading beyond these walls. The following morning arrived crisp and bright. Margaret sat in her Mercedes outside the mall, staring at the manila envelope on her passenger seat. Richard Lawson's letterhead gleamed through the window, gold-embossed, expensive paper, everything she'd once valued. Inside the envelope lay her future, or her past, she couldn't decide which. The offer had arrived at her condo at midnight, hand-delivered by Richard's assistant. Executive Vice President of Development, 6 figures, stock options, a corner office in his downtown high-rise. All she had to do was provide inside information about David's finances, help expedite the foreclosure process, make the transition smooth. She entered through the loading dock, avoiding the volunteers already gathering in the main concourse. The executive office still bore traces of her reign. The leather chairs she'd chosen, the mahogany desk she'd polished with pride. Now David's papers covered its surface. Repair estimates, vendor applications, community newsletters. Through the office window, she watched him in the atrium below. He knelt beside Grace at a folding table, receipts and calculators spread between them. "See here?" David pointed at columns of numbers. "Materials cost 40% more than labor if we hire out. But if volunteers do the work, we only pay for supplies," Grace finished. "I get it, Dad, but what about the electrical? We can't have volunteers doing that." Tom Bradley's nephew is a licensed electrician. He'll supervise the volunteers, make sure everything's up to code. Margaret found herself walking downstairs, drawn by something she couldn't name. Father and daughter looked up as she approached. "Morning, Margaret." David's greeting held no suspicion, though she carried betrayal in her purse. "The Petersons want to reopen their candy shop," Grace told her excitedly. "They just need help with the deposit on new display cases." "The Petersons closed 2 years ago," Margaret said flatly. "Bad location, worse business model." "They're good people," David countered. "Sometimes that matters more than location. Margaret laughed, sharp, bitter. Good people don't pay bills. Strategic planning does. Market analysis does. Is that why half our storefronts are empty? Grace asked quietly. The question stung because it was fair. Margaret's strategic planning had driven out family businesses in favor of chains that ultimately abandoned them anyway. You want to tell the Petersons yes based on feelings, Margaret said. That's not business. No, David agreed. It's community. Lunch came quickly. The food court buzzed with volunteers taking breaks. Someone had brought sandwiches, dozens of them, donated by the Korean deli down the street. Margaret sat apart, picking at turkey on rye, while David and Grace distributed food to workers. She watched him thank each person individually, watched Grace refill water cups without being asked. The developer's contract weighed heavy in her purse. When David finally sat beside her, she couldn't hold back any longer. You're naive, she said. Dangerously naive. He continued eating, unhurried. These people, they're using you. Free rent, reduced rates, payment plans. You think they'll remember your kindness when the bills come due? Maybe not, he said. But I'll remember. Idealism won't pay bills, David. The taxes alone. Neither does greed. The words landed soft but certain. Margaret felt them like a slap. You think I'm greedy? David turned to face her fully. I think you're scared. There's a difference. I'm trying to help you. Oh, no. You're trying to protect yourself from disappointment, from being foolish, from believing in something that might fail. Grace had stopped eating, her sandwich forgotten as she watched the adults square off. You want to know what I see? Margaret's voice rose. I see a man drowning in debt, surrounded by people who'll abandon him the moment things get hard. I see bankruptcy within 6 months. And if you're right, David asked, if we fail, then you lose everything. Everything? He gestured around the food court. Volunteers laughing, sharing stories, planning improvements. This looks like quite a lot to me. Margaret stood abruptly, chair scraping. When Richard Lawson crushes you, and he will, remember that I warned you. Remember that I tried to inject some reality into your fantasy. She stormed back to the office, leaving David and Grace in uncomfortable silence. Dad? Grace's voice came small. What if she's right? David pulled his daughter close. Then we'll have tried something worth trying. That night, Margaret sat alone in the executive office. The mall had gone quiet, volunteers departed, stores locked. Only security lights remained, casting long shadows across the developer's contract spread on her desk. Executive Vice President of Development. She read the terms again. Richard wanted insider information, financial records, vendor contracts, anything to strengthen his legal claim. The salary made her current earnings look like pocket change. All she had to do was betray a man who'd offered her grace when she deserved none. She thought of David's words, "You're scared." He was right. She was terrified of being foolish, of backing the wrong horse, of ending up like the Petersons, good people with a failed business and nothing to show for it. But she also remembered his face when talking about community, the way Grace looked at him with absolute trust, the volunteers who'd worked for free because David Harper had asked. Margaret picked up the contract, such heavy paper for such a light decision. She tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths, until Richard Lawson's offer became confetti on her desk. But fear remained, settling in her chest like stone. What if David really couldn't win? What if idealism and community and grace weren't enough against lawyers and liens and legal documents? What if she'd just torn up her only escape route from a sinking ship? Saturday morning brought unseasonable warmth for late autumn. David arrived at the mall before sunrise, finding volunteers already unloading equipment from pickup trucks. A local band hauled amplifiers through the main entrance, while teenagers strung lights across the atrium's upper level. Coffee! Grace appeared with 2 cups, dark circles under her eyes from staying up, making welcome banners. You should have slept in, And miss this?" She gestured at the transformation taking place. "Look what you started, Dad." By 10 o'clock, the atrium had become an impromptu amphitheater. The church choir arranged themselves on the stairs, their burgundy robes adding color to the worn marble. Food vendors set up sampling stations along the corridors. Korean barbecue, Mexican street tacos, soul food from the Baptist church kitchen. The first shoppers arrived cautiously, peering through the glass doors like survivors checking for danger. An elderly couple entered, then a family with 3 kids, then more. Within an hour, the mall hummed with voices it hadn't heard in years. "Balloon?" Grace asked a little boy hiding behind his mother's leg. When he nodded shyly, she produced a red one from behind her back, already inflated and ribboned. The band, 4 high school kids with more enthusiasm than skill, launched into covers of classic rock. Their drummer missed beats and the guitarist's amp buzzed, but nobody cared. Children danced. Parents swayed. Even the security guard tapped his foot. David moved through the crowd, shaking hands, learning names. The Petersons had set up a card table with samples of their homemade candles. The barber offered free beard trims. A young woman sold paintings of local landmarks from a blanket spread on the floor. Margaret stood near the information desk, arms crossed, watching. She'd worn jeans, first time David had seen her in anything but business attire. When a volunteer handed her a sample of empanada, she actually took it. At noon, the choir director raised his hand for quiet. The teenagers stopped playing. The crowd settled. "We're here to celebrate new beginnings," he said, "to sing about hope." Their voices rose in harmony, filling the space with amazing grace. An old hymn for an old mall, both seeking redemption. David found himself mouthing the words, remembering Sunday services with his wife, before cancer stole her voice and then everything else. The afternoon blurred past. More bands played, a bluegrass trio, a jazz quartet from the community college. The taco vendor ran out of pork. The Petersons sold 14 candles. Children's laughter echoed off the skylights. Near 4 o'clock, Mrs. Alvarez climbed the small platform they'd constructed. She clutched a piece of paper, hands trembling slightly. "I wrote something," she said into the microphone, "about this place." The crowd quieted. Even the children sensed something important happening. "These walls remember everything," she began, voice gaining strength. "First dates at the fountain. Prom dresses chosen with mothers. Santa photos and Easter bunnies. They remember when we mattered more than margins." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "Now they're learning new words. Grace, mercy. Second chances that come when you've stopped believing in them. When someone sees treasure where others saw trash." Her eyes found David in the crowd. These walls are listening again. To laughter instead of lawyers. To hope instead of haggling. They're remembering what they were built for. Not profit, but people. Not customers, but community. She folded the paper carefully. "Some say this place is dying. I say it's being born again, one family at a time, one kindness at a time, one impossible, beautiful, foolish act of faith at a time." Silence held for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted. David saw tears on faces throughout the crowd. Grace hugged Mrs. Alvarez as she stepped down. Even Margaret clapped, though she quickly wiped her eyes when she noticed David watching. Evening arrived gentle and golden. The string lights came on, transforming the atrium into something magical. Families lingered over coffee from the Korean deli. Teenagers took selfies by the fountain, which someone had gotten working again. A grandfather taught his granddaughter to dance to the jazz quartet's last song. David stood apart for a moment, overwhelmed. 6 weeks ago, he'd been mopping these floors at midnight, invisible and insignificant. Now children ran past calling, "Mr. David," and vendors shook his hand like he'd performed miracles. He found a quiet corner and bowed his head. "Thank you," he whispered, "for all of it. The good people, the second chances, even the fear. Help me be worthy of their trust. David! Margaret stood behind him, cell phone pressed to her ear, face drained of color. What's wrong? She lowered the phone. That was my contact at the courthouse. Richard filed his lawsuit yesterday. Emergency hearing Monday morning. We knew he would. You don't understand. He's requesting an immediate freeze on all mall accounts. If the judge agrees, we can't pay anyone. Not utilities, not security, not even the insurance. Everything stops Monday. The music had faded. Volunteers started packing equipment. The crowd thinned as families headed home, balloons bobbing, faces bright with the day's joy. Should we tell them? David asked, watching Grace help the band load their van. Margaret looked at the departing families, the volunteers, the vendors, counting their modest earnings. Let them have tonight, she said quietly. Let them have this moment. The fluorescent lights of the bank conference room felt cold against David's skin. Monday morning had barely begun, but 3 stern-faced representatives sat across from him, sliding document after document across the polished table. Effective immediately, all accounts associated with Crestwood Mall are frozen. The lead representative, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, tapped the court seal on the papers. No withdrawals, no deposits, no transactions of any kind until the lawsuit is resolved. David's chest tightened. The vendors, they need their weekend earnings. Some of them depend on daily sales just to eat. I'm sorry, Mr. Harper. The court order is clear. Margaret burst through the door, her usual composure cracking. This is ridiculous. Those accounts contain vendor deposits, not just mall funds. The representative stood. Take it up with the judge. Within an hour, word spread through the mall like wildfire. Vendors crowded the main office, voices rising in panic. Mrs. Alvarez clutched her worn ledger, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. David, I put everything into restocking my shelves. If I can't access those funds. The young barber slammed his fist against the doorframe. I knew this was too good to be true. Should have stayed closed. Margaret raised her hands, trying to restore order. Everyone, please. We'll find a solution. The lawsuit is baseless. Oh. Baseless doesn't put food on my table tonight, someone shouted from the back. David stood slowly, his shoulders heavy. The hope from Saturday's celebration felt like a distant dream. Give me 24 hours. I'll figure something out. But even as the words left his mouth, doubt gnawed at him. The vendors filed out, muttering and shaking their heads. Margaret lingered, her face drawn. They're right to be scared. She straightened papers on the desk with trembling hands. Lawson knew exactly when to strike. David spent the rest of the day in a blur of phone calls and meetings. His lawyer, a young public defender doing pro bono work, looked overwhelmed. The documents piled higher, liens, contracts, legal precedents that all seemed to favor the developer. By 3 o'clock, his phone buzzed with messages from vendors pulling out. By 5, 2 storefronts had already started packing. The mall echoed with the sound of boxes being taped shut and metal gates rolling down. David walked the empty corridors as evening fell. The string lights from Saturday still hung in the atrium, now looking fragile and foolish. His footsteps echoed off the tiles Grace had helped clean just days before. The drive home stretched longer than usual. His pickup truck's engine rattled, matching the exhaustion in his bones. Every red light gave him time to think about the mounting bills, the frozen accounts, the families depending on him. He found Grace at the kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks and her laptop. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Empty coffee cups lined the counter. Dad, I've been working on a crowdfunding page. If we can just get the word out. Gracie, it's past 9. You should have eaten dinner. She waved him off, fingers flying across the keyboard. I had some crackers earlier. Look, I've already got 50 shares on the mall's story. David noticed how thin her wrists looked, how her school uniform hung loose on her frame. When's the last time you had a real meal? Saturday, maybe? The reopening kept me busy. She rubbed her temples. I'm fine, Dad. This is more important. He moved to the stove, warming up leftover soup from the weekend. The smell of vegetables and broth filled the small kitchen. "Come eat. The computer will still be there." Grace stood slowly, swaying slightly. "Just feeling a little dizzy. Haven't been sleeping much. You've been up every night helping me with those budgets." "Someone has to." She managed a weak smile. "We're a team, remember?" David set the bowl on the table, watching her take small, reluctant spoonfuls. Her hands shook slightly. "After this, you're going straight to bed. But the crowdfunding can wait." She pushed the bowl away, barely touched. "I'm not really hungry. My stomach feels weird." Before David could respond, Grace's eyes rolled back. The spoon clattered to the floor as she slumped forward. He caught her just before she hit the table. "Grace! Gracie, wake up!" Her skin felt clammy, her breathing shallow. David lifted her in his arms, shocked at how light she'd become. He carried her to the truck, laying her across the back seat, and drove faster than he ever had before. The emergency room doors slid open to harsh white light and antiseptic smell. Nurses took Grace from his arms, wheeling her away on a gurney. Forms were shoved at him, questions fired rapidly. "When did she last eat? Any medical conditions? Insurance?" His hands shook as he signed papers, barely seeing the words. They led him to a small waiting area where time seemed to stop. Other families sat in their own bubbles of worry, but David felt entirely alone. Finally, a doctor appeared. "Mr. Harper, your daughter is stable. Severe exhaustion and dehydration combined with malnutrition. Has she been under stress?" David's voice came out hoarse. "She's been helping me. I bought a mall, and there's been complications. She needs rest, real rest, and regular meals." They let him into her room. Grace lay still, an IV drip attached to her thin arm, monitors beeping steadily. David took her hand, feeling the bones too close to the surface. "Lord, I can't lose her too." The hospital room hummed with mechanical rhythms. David hadn't moved from the vinyl chair beside Grace's bed, his hand wrapped around hers. The fourth drip counted time in drops. Monitors drew green lines across black screens, each peak confirming she was still there, still breathing. A nurse checked in every hour, adjusting blankets, noting numbers on charts. David watched Grace's chest rise and fall, counting breaths like he had when she was a baby. Back then, he'd been terrified of sudden infant death syndrome. Now, 15 years later, different fears kept him awake. Dr. Martinez returned at midnight with test results. Her blood work shows severe vitamin deficiencies. When teenagers skip meals repeatedly, their bodies can't cope with stress. Has she been taking on adult responsibilities? David's throat tightened. "She's been helping me save our business." "I didn't realize." Parents rarely do until something like this happens. The doctor's voice held no judgment, just tired experience. She needs complete rest. No school, no work, no stress for at least a week. After the doctor left, David buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. The weight of everything, the mall, the lawsuit, the community's hopes, crushed down on him. But worst was seeing Grace pay the price for his dreams. Footsteps clicked on linoleum. David looked up to find Margaret Colton standing in the doorway, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer suits. "Security told me you were here." She offered him a cup. "It's terrible, but it's hot." David accepted it with trembling hands. The bitter warmth spread through his chest. Margaret pulled up another chair, sitting beside him in silence. The woman who'd called him trash just weeks ago now sat vigil with him. "She looks so young," Margaret whispered, studying Grace's pale face. "She's been trying to be strong for me. I should have seen it." "You've had a few things on your mind." They sat quietly, sipping bad coffee while machines beeped. After an hour, Margaret touched his shoulder. "There's a chapel downstairs. You should stretch your legs." David hesitated, but Margaret nodded toward Grace. "I'll stay with her." "Go on." The chapel was small and non-denominational, with abstract stained glass and cushioned pews. David sank into the back row, too exhausted for formal prayer. Margaret entered moments later, sitting beside him. "I owe you an apology," she said to the empty altar. "That day I called you trash, ordered security to remove you. I was everything wrong with what the mall had become." David stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I used to care about community. 20 years ago, when my husband and I first bought Crestwood, we hosted charity events, sponsored Little League teams. But after he died, I got hard, cold, started seeing people as numbers on spreadsheets. Grief changes us." Margaret's laugh held no humor. It wasn't just grief. It was greed. "Richard Lawson approached me 5 years ago with expansion plans. I knew he was ruthless, but I wanted the money. We partnered on 3 projects. Each one destroyed something good: a family restaurant, a community center, a low-income apartment complex." She pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing her eyes. "I broke it off when he wanted to level a historic church. But by then I'd already become someone I didn't recognize. Calling you trash that day, I was describing myself." David turned to face her. "You're here now. That matters." "I don't know if it's enough." Margaret's voice cracked. "Richard's lawsuit is solid. He knows every legal trick because I taught him half of them." "Then we lose." David's words came out flat, defeated. "I mortgaged everything for this. If the mall fails, Grace and I have nothing. The vendors trusted me, and I've ruined them too." "You haven't ruined anyone." "Look at my daughter. She's in a hospital bed because I dreamed too big." Margaret gripped his hand with surprising strength. "She's in that bed because she believes in something worth fighting for. You gave all of us, something to believe in besides profit margins. I don't know how to keep fighting." "You're not fighting alone anymore." Margaret squeezed harder. "I know Richard's tactics. I know which judges he's paid off, which clerks he bribes. More importantly, I know which ones he hasn't." David studied her face, seeing determination replace the usual cold mask. "Why help me now?" "Because for the first time in 5 years, I don't hate who I see in the mirror." She stood, pulling him up with her. "Come on. Your daughter needs to see you strong when she wakes up." They walked back through fluorescent corridors. In the room, Grace's eyelids fluttered. David rushed to her bedside as her eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face. "Dad?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Grace's gaze shifted to Margaret, then back to David. "The mall? Don't worry about that now." "No." Grace's fingers tightened weakly around his. "Don't give up, Dad. Promise me." David kissed her forehead, tasting salt from his own tears. "I promise." Margaret stood at the foot of the bed, her expression soft. "We promise." The morning sun streamed through the atrium's skylights, illuminating faces David had never seen gathered in such numbers. Margaret stood at a makeshift podium, a display table dragged from the old department store, while vendors and townspeople filled every available space. David leaned against a pillar near the back, having driven straight from dropping Grace at home to rest. "I called you here because we're under attack," Margaret began, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Richard Lawson wants to destroy everything David Harper has started building." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Mrs. Alvarez clutched her worn leather purse. The young barber crossed his arms. Veterans from the Tuesday Coffee Group stood shoulder to shoulder. "Most of you know me as the woman who squeezed every penny from your rent, who turned this place into a monument to profit." Margaret paused, scanning faces. "You'd be right. I was that woman. But David Harper showed me something I'd forgotten, that malls aren't built on spreadsheets. They're built on people." Someone coughed. Feet shuffled on the tile floor. "I'm asking you to fight." "Not for me. God knows I don't deserve it. Fight for him." She pointed at David. "Fight for the man who offered reduced rent when you couldn't pay, who opened these doors to your churches, your scout troops, your AA meetings? Who saw community where others saw demolition? "What can we do against lawyers?" called out Mr. Chen from the flower shop. "Testify," Margaret replied. "Tell the judge what this mall means. Not in dollars, in lives." The crowd stirred. Tom Bradley, a Vietnam veteran, raised his hand. "I'll speak. This place gave me somewhere to go after my wife died. Tuesday coffee saved me from eating my gun." Other voices joined in. The choir director mentioned free rehearsal space. A young mother talked about the indoor playground keeping her kids safe during winter. Each story added weight to the growing momentum. Margaret held up her phone. "Grace Harper couldn't be here today, but she sent this." The screen connected to a portable speaker. Grace's face appeared on Margaret's tablet, propped against the podium. She looked tired, but determined from her bedroom. "Hey everyone, Dad doesn't know I'm recording this." Her weak smile drew chuckles. "He'd probably tell me to rest instead. But I need you to know something. My mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. Dad and I pretty much sleepwalked through life after that. Then he bought this mall, this crazy, broken, beautiful mall. And suddenly, we had purpose again." David's throat tightened. He hadn't known she'd made this video. "You all became our family," Grace continued. "Mrs. Alvarez teaching me Spanish while I helped shelve books. Mr. Chen showing me how to arrange flowers for Mom's grave. The veterans including Dad in their stories, making him laugh again. This isn't just concrete and steel, it's where we learn to live again." Her image paused, gathering strength. "Richard Lawson thinks money wins, but we have something better. We have each other. Please, protect the place that's giving people hope again. Protect my dad's dream, because it's not just his anymore, it's ours." The video ended. David wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Around him, others did the same. "She's right," Margaret said, her own voice thick. "This is our dream now. The hearing is Thursday. We have 3 days." The crowd erupted into action. Mrs. Alvarez started a sign-up sheet for speakers. The barber offered to drive elderly residents to court. Church groups volunteered to pray and provide lunch. Within minutes, the atrium transformed into a command center. Margaret approached David, who still stood frozen by the pillar. "You okay?" "She made that video from her sickbed." His voice barely carried. "That kid has your heart, and apparently your stubbornness." Margaret pulled out a legal pad. "We need 8 strong testimonies minimum. Tom Bradley's a given. Mrs. Alvarez, too. But we need diversity. Young families, teenagers, maybe some of the construction workers you've hired." David nodded, composing himself. "The Nguyen family. They just opened the banh mi shop. And Jennifer, the single mom who runs the daycare." They worked through the afternoon, interviewing volunteers and helping craft statements. The mall buzzed with purpose. Teenagers painted support banners. The church choir practiced hymns for moral support. Someone donated folding tables that became writing stations where volunteers helped others put feelings into words. By evening, the food court had transformed into a legal war room. Margaret coached speakers on courtroom etiquette, while David reviewed financial documents with a volunteer accountant. The smell of free pizza, donated by the reopened Italian place, mixed with coffee and determination. "My English not so good," worried Mr. Sok, the Cambodian refugee who ran the key-cutting kiosk. "Judge won't listen." "Your English is fine," David assured him. "But more importantly, your story matters. Tell them about teaching kids traditional dance here on Saturdays. Tell them about building community." At 10 o'clock, David finally called an end to preparations. People hugged goodbye, promises to continue tomorrow flowing freely. Margaret stayed behind, helping him lock up. "We might actually have a shot," she said, securing the main entrance. "Either way, tonight, it's already worth it." Margaret studied him. "You really mean that?" "Look what we built. Not the stores or the renovations, the family, win or lose. Thursday they've found each other. You're either a saint or crazy." David managed a tired smile. Probably both. Grace gets it from somewhere. They walked to their cars together, the empty parking lot stretching wide under flickering streetlights. Tomorrow would bring more preparation, more stories, more hope. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear. David stood before his bedroom mirror, fumbling with the tie he hadn't worn since his wife's funeral. His only suit hung loose on his frame. Stress had stolen pounds he couldn't spare. "Let me." Grace appeared in the doorway, still pale but steady on her feet. She'd insisted on coming despite doctor's orders. "You should be resting." "And miss this?" Mom would never forgive me. She adjusted his tie with practiced hands. "Perfect." The courthouse steps teemed with supporters by 9 o'clock. Hand-drawn posters bobbed above the crowd. Save our mall, community over condos, Crestwood equals home. Children clutched their parents' hands while elderly couples leaned on walkers, determined to witness the fight. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. David recognized every face. Mrs. Alvarez clutching her late husband's photo, Tom Bradley in his dress uniform, the Nguyen family in their Sunday best. They'd closed their shops, lost a day's income, all to be here. Richard Lawson entered with an entourage of suits, their leather briefcases and confident strides announcing their expertise. He caught David's eye and smirked, settling into the plaintiff's table like a king claiming his throne. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman." The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, took her seat. "We're here regarding Lawson Development versus Crestwood Mall Holdings. Mr. Lawson, you may begin." Lawson's lead attorney stood, smooth as silk. "Your Honor, this is simple. Crestwood Mall is failing. Mr. Harper, while well-intentioned, lacks the capital and expertise to salvage it. My client holds legitimate liens and offers a profitable alternative, modern condominiums that will increase property values and tax revenue." Charts appeared on screens. Graphs showed declining mall revenues, projected condo profits, tax benefits. The presentation gleamed with corporate efficiency. "Furthermore," the attorney continued, "Mr. Harper has already defaulted on several payments since acquiring the property. He's drowning, Your Honor. Better to end this experiment before more people get hurt." David felt the crowd behind him deflate. The numbers looked damning in stark PowerPoint clarity. Judge Coleman turned to him. "Mr. Harper, your response?" David stood slowly. No briefcase, no visual aids, just trembling hands and truth. "Your Honor, I'm not a businessman. I'm a janitor, a veteran, a father." His voice carried quiet strength. "I bought this mall with everything I had, my savings, my wife's life insurance, a mortgage on my home, not for profit, but for something Mr. Lawson's charts can't measure." He gestured to the packed gallery. "These people, this community. That mall isn't just retail space. It's where Tom Bradley found purpose after losing his leg in Afghanistan, where Mrs. Alvarez keeps her husband's memory alive through stories, where families gather when they can't afford anywhere else." "Objection," Lawson's attorney interrupted. "Emotional manipulation." "Overruled. Continue, Mr. Harper. I'd like to call witnesses, Your Honor." Mrs. Alvarez went first, her voice shaking but clear. 20 years my husband ran that bookstore. When he died, I nearly gave up. The mall was dying too, empty, cold. Then Mr. Harper came. He cut my rent in half, helped me restock, brought customers back. That bookstore isn't just income, it's my heart. Without it, I have nothing. Tom Bradley limped to the stand next. Lost my leg in Kandahar. Came home to nothing, no job, no purpose. Planned to eat a bullet, if I'm honest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. David hired me to help with security, gave me dignity. That mall saved my life, Your Honor, literally. Jennifer Martinez, the single mother, bounced her infant on her hip while testifying. The free community dinners fed my kids when I couldn't. The daycare David helped establish lets me work. Without Crestwood, we'd be homeless. Witness after witness painted pictures Lawson's graphs couldn't capture. the Cambodian refugee teaching traditional dance, the teenager who found mentorship at the barber shop instead of the streets, the church choir that rehearsed for free in the atrium. Lawson's attorney cross-examined ruthlessly. These are lovely stories, but can Mr. Harper make payments? Can he compete with online retail? Can he maintain the building to code? Each question hammered at financial reality. David couldn't deny the challenges. Finally, Lawson himself stood. Your Honor, I'm not heartless, but business is business. These people's struggles won't disappear if the mall survives another 6 months, then collapses anyway. My development offers jobs, housing, progress. Sometimes the kindest cut is the quickest. Judge Coleman absorbed it all, her expression unreadable. This case raises complex questions about property rights versus community impact. I'll review all evidence and render my decision tomorrow morning. Court adjourned. The gavel's bang felt like a punch. David stood frozen as the crowd filtered out, offering encouragement he barely heard. That evening, David's small living room held an unlikely trinity. Margaret sat on the worn couch while Grace curled in the recliner. They'd gathered without planning, drawn by shared anxiety. We did our best, Margaret said, though uncertainty colored her tone. Is it enough? Grace asked. David looked at these two women, one who'd called him trash, one who called him hero. I don't know, but I know this. We already won something. Look at us. Look what we've become. Margaret reached for his hand, then Grace's. Should we pray? They bowed their heads in the lamplight, three unlikely allies bound by hope, pleading for tomorrow's mercy. The courthouse clock struck 9 as David entered the packed courtroom. Grace walked beside him, still pale but determined to witness this moment. Margaret followed, her usual designer heels clicking with less authority than before. Richard Lawson already occupied his table, manicured fingers drumming against leather briefcases. His confidence hadn't wavered overnight. All rise. Judge Coleman entered, her black robe sweeping behind her. The manila folder in her hands held their fate. Please be seated. She adjusted her glasses, studying the pages before her. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, each second an eternity. This case presents a fundamental conflict between private property rights and community welfare. Mr. Lawson's position is legally sound. He holds valid liens, the mall operates at a loss, and his proposed development would generate substantial tax revenue. David's heart sank. Grace gripped his hand. However, Judge Coleman continued, the law must serve justice, not merely profit. The testimonies presented yesterday revealed something no financial spreadsheet could capture. Crestwood Mall has become essential infrastructure for this community's most vulnerable citizens. She looked directly at Lawson. Your liens, while legitimate, were acquired through predatory practices during the previous owner's distress. The court finds this unconscionable. The judge's voice strengthened. Furthermore, Mr. Harper's purchase at public auction was conducted properly through county channels. He is the rightful owner. The community testimonies demonstrate the mall serves a vital public interest that supersedes private development interests. She lifted her gavel. Mr. T. Lawson's claim is dismissed with prejudice. He is ordered to release all liens immediately and barred from further legal action regarding this property. The gavel struck. The courtroom exploded. Mrs. Alvarez sobbed into her handkerchief. Tom Bradley pumped his fist. Jennifer Martinez's baby squealed as people erupted in celebration. David sat stunned, the weight of months lifting so suddenly he felt dizzy. Grace threw her arms around his neck. You did it, Dad. We did it, he corrected. But his words were lost in the chaos. Margaret stood trembling, tears cutting channels through her carefully applied makeup. When David turned to her, she pulled him into an embrace that surprised them both. I was so wrong about you, she whispered against his shoulder. Lawson stormed out, his attorney scrambling behind him. The stern bailiff, a mountain of a man who'd overseen countless cases, allowed himself a small smile. Outside, November sunshine bathed the courthouse steps. Reporters thrust microphones forward like spears. "Mr. Harper, how does a janitor take down a millionaire developer?" "David." "What's your secret?" "Is this a David versus Goliath story?" David stood at the top of the steps, Grace on one side, Margaret on the other. The crowd of supporters spread below like a living quilt of faces. Brown, black, white, young, old, all beaming up at him. He cleared his throat. A reporter asked how a janitor saved a mall. He paused, looking at each face in the crowd. "I didn't. We all did. Every person who volunteered, who testified, who believed when belief seemed foolish. This victory belongs to all of us." "But what about Lawson?" another reporter pressed. "He'll probably try again." Margaret stepped forward, surprising everyone. "Let him try. He'll find this community isn't for sale." The crowd roared approval. That evening, Crestwood Mall glowed like a constellation landed on Earth. String lights wound through the atrium, casting warm shadows on faces bright with joy. The fountain, dry for years, bubbled with fresh water that caught the light like scattered diamonds. Tables groaned under potluck dishes. Tom Bradley's military recipe chili, Mrs. Alvarez's empanadas, Jennifer Martinez's mother's tamales, the Cambodian family's spring rolls. The barbershop quartet harmonized with the church choir. Children raced between legs, their laughter echoing off walls that had stood silent too long. David stood near the fountain, watching it all unfold. His father's voice echoed across decades. "Son, success isn't what you gather, it's what you scatter." Margaret approached the makeshift stage, tapping the microphone. The crowd quieted. "Most of you know me as the woman who—" She swallowed hard. "Who treated people badly. Who saw profit where I should have seen persons. Who called a good man trash because his collar was blue instead of white." She found David's eyes in the crowd. "I spent decades believing money meant merit, that poverty proved weakness. David Harper proved me wrong. He showed me strength isn't in bank accounts, but in character. Leadership isn't about commanding, but serving." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. To all of you, I looked down on, dismissed, ignored. You deserved better. This mall deserves better. And thanks to David, we all get a second chance." She gestured to the wall behind her. "Which brings me to tonight's dedication." A cloth fell away, revealing a bronze plaque, Crestwood Mall, rebuilt 2023. This place was built not on money, but on mercy. The crowd erupted again. David felt Grace slip her hand into his. "Mom would be proud," she whispered. "She is," he whispered back. The celebration continued past closing time. Nobody eager to leave this moment, this victory, this family forged from struggle. 3 weeks before Christmas, Crestwood Mall hummed with life that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The small ice rink in the atrium, really just synthetic ice that Tom Bradley and his veteran buddies had installed, drew crowds of wobbling children. Grace knelt at the edge, steadying a 5-year-old who'd never skated before. Her cheeks glowed pink with health, the hollow exhaustion replaced by teenage vitality. "Push with your left foot," she coached. "That's it. You're doing great." The child's mother watched from a nearby bench, coffee warming her hands. 6 months ago, she'd been shopping at the strip mall 20 miles away. Now she came here, where her daughter could skate for free while she caught up with neighbors. Across the atrium, Mrs. Alvarez's bookstore overflowed with people settled into mismatched chairs for Thursday evening's poetry reading. The elderly woman's voice carried through the mall as she read Langston Hughes. "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." The barber shop next door buzzed with more than just clippers. Marcus had added 2 chairs and hired his nephew fresh from barber school. Men waited their turn, swapping stories and arguing about football, while gospel music played from speakers Marcus had bought at a yard sale. "You see the game last night?" one customer asked. "Course I did. That quarterback couldn't throw water out of a boat." Laughter rolled out into the mall corridor, mixing with the scent of fresh-cut hair and aftershave. The food court had transformed most dramatically. Gone were the shuttered franchise spaces. In their place, local vendors served everything from soul food to pupusas. The Cambodian family's noodle station sent steam curling toward the skylights. Jennifer Martinez's mother flipped tortillas on a griddle, filling them with beans and cheese for the after-school crowd. Families filled tables that had stood empty for years. Parents actually sat and talked while their children ate, instead of rushing through drive-thrus. The lonely ate alongside strangers who became friends. Margaret moved through it all with purpose, but without the sharp edges that once defined her. She wore simpler clothes now, still professional but approachable. When she spotted trash on the floor, she picked it up herself instead of snapping at maintenance. David found her helping Tom Bradley adjust a crooked Christmas wreath. "Little to the left," she said, steadying the ladder. "Margaret Colton, holding a ladder," Tom marveled. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Lots of things I never thought I'd see," she replied, but her tone held warmth instead of bite. When Tom climbed down, Margaret walked with David toward the center of the mall. They stopped at the bronze plaque, its message gleaming under the lights. This place was built not on money, but on mercy. David ran his fingers over the raised letters, remembering his wife's funeral, the bills that followed, the nights he'd mopped these floors wondering if Grace would have any future at all. Margaret stood beside him, studying his weathered face. "I need to tell you something." He waited, patient as always. "When I called you trash that morning..." She struggled with words that had been churning inside her for weeks. "I was really looking at myself." All that anger, that contempt, it was fear. Fear that without money, without status, I was nothing. David turned to face her fully. "You gave me a second chance when I deserved none. Why?" "Same reason this mall got one," David said simply. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to become who they're meant to be. But I was cruel. You were lost. Now you're found." Margaret's eyes filled. "We gave this place one together, didn't we? A second chance." David smiled, the expression transforming his tired features. Together. The Christmas lights strung throughout the mall cast everything in warm gold. The church choir had assembled near the fountain, their voices rising in silent night. Shoppers paused, some joining in, others simply listening with closed eyes. David and Grace found a bench near the rink. She leaned against his shoulder, watching a father teach his twin boys to skate, their shrieks of delight bouncing off the glass ceiling. "Remember when we first walked through here after you bought it?" Grace asked. "Half the lights were out. That fountain was full of garbage. I remember you said we'd fix it. You said it was too big a job. You said nothing's too big when people work together?" Grace smiled. "I was right." "You usually are." "Got that from your mother." They sat in comfortable silence, watching life flow through spaces that had stood empty. A teenage couple shared a milkshake. An elderly man read stories to his grandchildren outside the bookstore. Margaret helped a young mother whose stroller wheel had stuck. "You did it, Dad," Grace whispered. "You gave us a home." David pulled her closer, feeling the solid warmth of his daughter against his side, hearing the mall pulse with renewed life around them. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "God did. We just listened." The choir began "O Holy Night." Their voices soared toward the skylights, where stars were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. The mall, once dead, now alive, shone like a beacon of faith, hope, and second chances into the winter evening. If you enjoyed the story I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy, please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.